Thanks very much. G'day, my name's Steve. There's no screen here. Right. There's a disclaimer if you like a big green tick in a box, you can read that. I like defence. I actually like sectors that are irrationally unloved by other investors. We plan. I like things that, for whatever reason, people don't like. And if you look at the various themes around defence, ESG, for example, defence is pretty unliked. I don't know why. It's a $1.7 trillion US market in the allied sphere. There's roughly 50 countries in the world that we can sell stuff to as an Australian defence company without being arrested as a gun runner. That's essentially our target market. That's in the old 2% world. So there's a lot of news lately. There's a new US administration. They're talking a lot about increasing defence budgets. These defence budgets are at the moment, or have been up until recently, at near record lows. US defence spending, believe it or not, despite the fact that last year they spent $864 billion, was actually at a near record low at 3.45% of their GDP. In the non-wartime years of the Cold War, non-combat years of the Cold War, they were spending close to 6% of GDP on defence. European defence spending was embarrassing, way south of 2%. If anyone understands why Donald Trump hates Canada so much, they were contributing 1.3% of GDP to defence. So there's been a chronic underspending. Even with that being the case, it's still worth $1.7 trillion as a market right now. That's about to double, if not double and a half. European defence spending is getting better. So just in the last few days, last sort of 6 days, the NATO nations came out and agreed to take their spending up to 5% of GDP over the next 5 to 10 years. I think they're just waiting out the current US administration and they'll go back to their old ways. But there's a real impetus to that. Poland is not in that bucket. Poland has been occupied by Russia before, and the new saying is hell no, never again. So the Poles are doing what the Europeans should and spending lots. So the US has been out there busily resetting its relationships in many areas. We could talk about tariffs, but in this area it's defence. So, and this has provoked a lot of activity. So a lot of nations have come out and basically, probably everyone except Australia, have come out and said we'll aggressively actually increase our defence budgets. So all this is pointing to an amazing, massive opportunity in defence. You'll also notice I speak very fast. If I'm going too fast, please slow me down, but I'm in between you and lunch as well, so I want to get through a lot of this. And so why is so much being spent on defence? You know, every 70 years we go collectively insane as a species. 3 years ago, a madman started a mechanised ground war in Europe again because we forgot how bad the last one was. You have the issues in the Middle East. You have the issues in India, Pakistan just recently. And you've got a particularly bellicose tyrant in China who is requiring his military to be ready to seize Taiwan from 2027 onwards. The last time we ignored a dictator was in Ukraine in February 2022. And so I think when dictators threaten to do things, we should listen to them. There's an amazing amount of opportunity out there in the way that combat and defence is fought. This is best exemplified by drones. And I'll use drones. I actually hate drones as an example, but it's the best example to use. So combat and defence forces are going away from very expensive, very exquisite, very few military systems, so like big expensive missiles, down to systems in the hands of getting closer to the front, smaller systems, cheaper systems that are exemplified by drones. So you're seeing this technology shift. There's a lot more to it than that. There's an entire layer and stack of things that occur there. I think what's exposed to the public through some of these dreadful videos you see out of the European theatre is drones. Drones doing all sorts of things. And the amount of innovation that's happened there, I mean, that conflict started with the Ukrainians very successfully using a Turkish unmanned aircraft, a drone, that went to shop-bought drones. Now there's things called Queen drones. Queen drones carry smaller drones. There's fibre optic drones that drag a fibre optic cable behind them so they can't be jammed. There's thermite spewing drones, which I think should be banned under Geneva Convention. So there's no end of things out there at the moment. So the pace of innovation in this sector is off the charts. So the general macro environment out there for defence is great. Back at the end of 21, start of 22, venture took a bit of a tumble with the zero interest rate environment sort of going in the US and exits becoming uncertain. AI came to maturity in an investment sense or an investor sense, came to visibility to investors around them at the same time. Very much a confounding feature in the tech space. AI is tough because, if you've got a technology that can change the way that business is done between sort of 5 to 15% month on month, and you take 3 months to make an investment decision, it's not hard to see why it's really confounding. Like, within 3 to 4 months, something can be twice as good or half as cheap. So it's a really confusing spot to make investments in. So we see there's numerous factors that make sort of an allocation of capital to defence, we think, really quite beneficial. I'll pick some of the eyes out of this because this keeps ticking down. AUKUS, much is made of AUKUS. AUKUS is a three-nation project between Australia, the US, and the UK to essentially purchase 3 US nuclear submarines, then build 5 submarines here. It's a $372 billion program over 32 years. I don't think anything we invest in here will ever go near a nuclear submarine. But what will happen in this sector is that hundreds, if not thousands, of engineers and scientists will come into this sector. They'll work for a large defence company. They'll have a better idea. They'll get annoyed. They'll start their own business in defence. So there's all this activities coming into the sector. The other thing that AUKUS did was it actually liberalised the transfer and the trade in defence goods and knowledge between those 3 nations for the most part. Loosely before November last year, that was governed by something called ITAR. ITAR is a set of regulations out of the US that the US force on their allies with respect to military and defence technology transfers. If we're going to build 5 of their submarines here, there's no way known that could stay in place. So for want of a better purpose, Australia is going through a process of becoming the 51st state of America with respect to defence technology transfers. So we're being brought inside the tent to make that easier. There's some things we'll never get a hold of, nor should we. Specifically in that legislation, nuclear weapons secrets weren't included, nor were implements of torture, which is a good thing too. The really curious thing in the whole defence investing environment was that Russia used to be an 18.6% supplier of global arms exports. And the latest set of numbers here, which I think I've got, I do, cool. They're down to, I forgot they are now, they're down to 11%, almost a bit over 10%. So in a time when militaries are expanding their budgets, one of the largest supplier of military goods in an export sense in the world has been much reduced. So in essence, they've been embargoed. Everyone understands their systems aren't that good, to be honest, and they have to refuel their own arsenals. So there's been a large player from the defence export moved. Now, in those 50 countries that Australians can sell to, Russia wasn't a huge supplier as well, but it was a material supplier. So, which is sort of one of the more curious aspects to this. Now, defence is or was hard to invest in. There was a perception of a single customer risk. Your only customer is the Australian Defence Force. 50 countries out there that we can sell to. Each one's got an Army, Navy, Air Force. God bless America, they've got Coast Guard, Marines and Space Force as well. Each one of those has an organisation that can buy off tender. You can ring up the purchasing officer, and if they've got if you've got what they want to buy, you can sell it to them in a very low document process. Taking months, not years, would be the best description for it. Is it easy? No, but it's a lot easier. So there's a lot of customers out there, so it's not the single customer risk. Defence is mostly hardware. When we look at defence, we're trying to think about the 5 pillars of defence. So defence is broken into the 5, domains of defence: sea, air, land, space, and cyber. Then we look at portfolio construction. We look at hardware and software as well, given the different return profiles there. So very conscious of how you actually build a durable portfolio in this space is to understand, I suppose, the components that make it up. And ESG keeps people out. ESG is just a societal pox. It's a very, very, very sort of high-minded first world consideration that only exists in robust Western democracies, which, to be quite blunt, are defended by robust men carrying heavy things. So ESG, for irrational reasons, keeps people out of the market. I actually like that because, to be honest, the opportunity in defence is on the buy side. Because everyone's scared of defence, either for ESG reasons or for other reasons. You tend to make a lot of money on the buy side, so defence equity is well priced. Down that slide. So, how do you make defence easier? Forget the small customer. The allied defence market is currently $1.7 trillion US. The Australian defence budget's $35 billion US. Even if the Australian Defence Force was the best customer in the galaxy, you should ignore them because they're just too small. So the biggest customer in that is the US at $0.9 trillion. Growing to $1 trillion. Europe is growing from $385 billion to a bit over $500 billion in the next couple of years. Lots of big customers out there, lots of easier customers out there. In the US Department of Defense, there are 265 organisations that can buy off tender. In Australia, there's 7. You really can't build it and they will come in defence. That just does not exist. You have to find a demand signal. So everyone publishes, well, all the Western democracies anyway, publish their demand signals. The Yanks are great at it. They'll talk about hypersonics, they'll talk about drone, counter drone, whatever it might be, naval warfare, mine warfare, etc. Then you find a unit with a budget that can try your thing. So you find one of those 265 different units out there that can essentially buy it, and they've got a budget behind it. So you can get it into the hands of a person who will test it, probably in very real conditions, but you better hope it works, because if it doesn't, there's nothing worse with a soldier with a toy that doesn't work. They'll talk about it forever. But you can find very, very proactive, very front foot forward buyers out there to get your product in the market very fast. And portfolio construction in this space is massively important. We went through before about the 5 domains: CE, land, space, cyber, and then hardware, software. You have to really understand where all that lies. And hardware, as we know, it's well named. As an investor, it's really hard to make money from compared to software. And there's lots more momentum coming into the space. There's some standout names here. Andrew, Palmer Luckey's company. If you know Palmer Luckey, only a California skater boy can have a name, Palmer Luckey. But he had the company called Oculus Rift. Sold to Facebook for $2 billion, poured a lot of that capital into a defence prime called Andrew, who had a large part of their engineering bases out of Australia, actually. He sort of appropriated the old Boeing Skunk Works workforce. So they did a round recently. They raised $2.5 billion on a $25 billion valuation, only after in October last year, raising $1.4 billion on 14. So very much go ahead, seeing a lot of these contracts out there at the moment. So there's a lot of money coming into this at this point in time. The US does not have the hang up on ESG that Australia does. They're very, very proudly, national security focused. When I pitch in Australia, as an example, I always talk about how I'm going to make money for my investors. When I pitch in America, I always talk about protecting democracy, because it's just a difference in audience. So that's me. I've actually got 2.5 minutes spare. I don't know where Steve or the host is. If I can keep going or take a question or two, I don't mind taking a question. Oh, you're just there. Sorry. There you are. Societal pulse. Environmental social governance. It's basically, I don't really know what it does other than sort of rip off people who contribute to super funds. I want something good about it. So there's a perception in ESG that defence, that if something does harm, therefore it's not a societal good. So whereas I believe defence of the realm is a societal good, to be quite honest. So difference of opinion. ESG hate us, we hate them. We call it a draw. Yeah, so there are we have a defence-oriented VC fund, Beans and Venture Partners. Come and see me for a deck. That's all good. So generally, we target sovereign Australian businesses, where we're an ESVCLP fund, so we have to do 80% of capital inside of Australia. We target businesses that do not sell to the Australian Defence Force. We think the Australian Defence Force not only is a small market, but it's the most dysfunctional market in the allied world, and it's actually a sovereign risk to our businesses, so we ignore the Australian Defence Force. We will only, however, invest in businesses that produce products that the Australian Defence Force would use legally. So no weapons of mass destruction, no landmines, which is a shame because they're pretty cool. We've done 3 investments so far. One in the space reconnaissance area, so non-Earth imaging, a business that uses spacecraft to take pictures of other spacecraft. We've got a business that has a hyperspectral sensor. Think, if you've ever seen the movie Predator, like Predator Vision, basically, which is pretty cool. In a small package you stick on a drone. And then the third one, which I should remember, is a business that does digital twins of constellations of spacecraft. Space is 80% militarised at this point in time. There's a looming conflict coming in the Indo-Pacific, and what happened recently with the US withdrawing military and intelligence support, or the threat of, or actually withdrawing military and intelligence support from Ukraine, and the implied threat to their allies was stark, and now everyone is racing to get more assets into space because that's the biggest gap that the US would actually withhold. So that's actually got everybody terrified, to be honest.
All right. Do we have more questions? Okay, that's it.
No. I can talk all day.
Yeah, just sort of wondering on how you see the impact of confidentiality and transparency on values with some of these companies.
The impact on
value.
On value, right? Yeah. So look, it's hard. So we don't have a single person inside our company that actually has a security clearance. It would. We don't want anything other than commercial and confidence information. It would triple the cost of the business, understandably, for security reasons. So we work to what we call minimum viable capability. So typically, what happens is defence non-dilutive grants have created these things. They've been accepted by the Defence Force, and then it goes into a valley of death. So we take the capability from the valley of death, and we fund it into the US. So we shouldn't say, we do have one person inside the organisation with a defence clearance, but he's still a serving member. But he doesn't bring that in. So it is hard, and so you have to have very exceptionally trusted networks, and I can take you through our advisors that we use in the business as well to moderate a lot of those risks. But for the most part, it's something everybody wants, but the Defence Force doesn't know how to pay for it.